Your parents didn't die in that wagon accident, Finn. My father had them killed.
You're lying.
I sleep in the stable, whispered the wounded Apache. You'll sleep in a real bed, sighed the bounty hunter. The pouring rain came down in sheets, a cold, relentless cascade that seemed to mourn the very ground it struck. The wind howled a hollow, mournful tune, rattling the windows of my tiny cabin on the outskirts of Serenity Creek. A lone woman, barely a shadow in the churning darkness, collapsed against the stable door as a flash of lightning illuminated her torn, mud-streaked dress. My heart, a thing I'd learned to keep locked away for a decade of living on the edge of nothing, ached with a strange, forgotten feeling. I knew I should have turned away, should have let the storm wash her troubles away, just as it had washed away the countless others who'd stumbled into this forgotten corner of the world. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my lantern and stepped out into the deluge. I rushed toward her, the rain soaking through my canvas duster and plastering my long hair to my face. The light of the lantern flickered, dancing across her face, and I stopped short. Her features were delicate, etched with a kind of weary defiance. Her dark eyes, even in this tempest of misery, held a flicker of a fierce, untamed fire. I could see the blood on her shoulder, a crimson stain on the pale fabric, but her gaze was not on her wound. It was on me, on the faint outline of the six-shooter holstered at my hip. The recognition in her eyes was chilling. This was no helpless damsel in distress. She was a hunter, or at the very least, a survivor of a hunt. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away, and if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. She whispered something in a language I couldn't place, a lyrical, almost melodic string of sounds that was utterly out of place in this wretched storm. Then, she switched to a halting broken English, her words coming out in labored gasps. I need help. Number where? 2. Go. The voice, despite its attempt at being rough and unrefined, had a soft, educated lilt. It was the kind of voice you'd expect to hear in the parlors of San Francisco, not at the mercy of a storm in a godforsaken mining town. That dissonance, that fleeting moment of perfection in her carefully constructed lie, was the first hook she sank into my lonely soul. "Ma'am, you're hurt," I said, my voice as gruff and weary as the landscape itself. I kept my hands in plain sight, a gesture of peace in a world that rarely knew it. "There's a cot inside, and a fire to get you warm. I can tend to that wound proper." But she shook her head, a tremor running through her exhausted frame. "Number, please. No house. Stable. Safer." The word safer hung in the air between us, a heavy unspoken truth. Safer from what? From me? Or from something else? Something she believed was still on her trail? Something that would tear down my home just to get to her? I studied her in the flickering glow of the lantern. Her story didn't add up. Her clothes, though torn and covered in mud, were made of fine, heavy wool. Her hands, when she briefly held them out, were calloused, but not with the rough, permanent scars of a laborer. They were the hands of someone who knew how to handle a horse and a rifle, but not of someone who had spent their life breaking rocks or digging for gold. Her attempts at sounding uneducated felt forced, like a poorly rehearsed play. What was she hiding? And why was she running to me, to this desolate corner of the Wild West, where men came to lose themselves, not to find sanctuary? She winced, pressing a hand against her wound. A small, strange, intricate leather pouch dangled from her belt, a curious object that seemed out of place with her nomad persona. A chill of foreboding ran down my spine. This wasn't a simple case of a woman in need. This was something far more complicated. A web of lies and secrets that she was hoping to entangle me in. But her eyes held a depth of sadness that mirrored my own. I saw a reflection of the same kind of bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that comes from a life lived constantly on the run, a life defined by pain and loss. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. I settled onto a hay bale at a respectable distance, making myself seem less of a threat. She hesitated, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind as she considered her answer. "Lyra," she said finally. The name hung in the air, a beautiful sound that felt both like a truth and a lie. "They call me Lyra." That pause, that moment of careful consideration bothered me more than her injury. In my years as a bounty hunter, I'd learned to read the subtle tells of men and women with something to hide. A person who hesitates before giving their name is a person with many names. I pulled out my tobacco pouch and started rolling a cigarette, keeping my movements slow and deliberate, a silent promise that I wasn't going anywhere. "Lyra," I repeated, the name tasting foreign on my tongue. "That wound needs to be cleaned. It's a risk you can't afford to take, not out here." She nodded, a single, decisive movement. "I know," she said quietly, her voice losing its forced brokenness for a brief moment. I know a little bit. The slip was small, but I caught it. The perfect grammar, the refined enunciation. It was a glimpse behind the curtain of her disguise, a tantalizing peek at the real person hiding beneath the layers of mud and deceit. The rain drummed harder on the stable roof, a lonely symphony of desperation. I lit my cigarette, the flame of the match, a tiny beacon against the oppressive darkness. I studied her again, this time more closely. Her hands, though dirty from travel, lacked the deep calluses and permanent stains that came from a lifetime of manual labor on the frontier. The compass hanging from her belt was a beautiful, meticulously crafted thing. Not the cheap, worn-down tool of a common traveler. It was made of polished brass and intricate designs I'd never seen before, and it seemed to hum with a faint, almost magical energy. A cold dread began to settle in my gut. This wasn't just a woman running from her past. This was a woman carrying a secret of immense value, a secret that had led to her present state of agony and fear. "You're not from this territory," I observed, the smoke from my cigarette a ghost in the lantern light. She looked up sharply, and I saw something flash across her face. Not fear of me, but fear of discovery, of being seen for who she truly was. "I am a nomad," she insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. "Maybe," I said, taking a long drag. "But that compass, it's too perfect, too new. It's like something out of a legend, not a tool for a common traveler. I've never seen anything like it. And the way you looked at my gun, that's not the look of someone unfamiliar with firearms." She went very still, like a hunted animal that knows it's been cornered. That's when the distant sound of horse hooves reached my ears, the steady, purposeful rhythm of riders approaching through the storm. And in that moment, I knew whatever she was running from had just caught up. The sound of the approaching horses was a drumbeat of doom against the relentless rain. Lyra, the name still feeling strange on my tongue, had gone pale as a winter ghost, her eyes fixed on the stable door as if it were a portal to hell. The intricate beadwork on her compass seemed to glow faintly in the lantern's amber light, a silent testament to the secrets it held. "Friends of yours?" I whispered, my hand instinctively dropping to the handle of my holstered Colt. She shook her head frantically, her careful, broken English disappearing entirely. "Please," she begged, her voice now a clear, educated whisper. "Don't let them know I'm here. They'll kill us both." The raw terror in her voice was enough to convince me. Whatever she had done, whatever she was running from, her fear was genuine, a palpable thing that filled the small stable with its icy presence. I moved to the stable window and peered through a gap in the wooden boards. 3 riders approached, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats pulled low against the downpour. Their movements were not those of men seeking shelter. They were predators, moving with a silent, deadly efficiency. The lead rider, a tall, imposing man with a face like weathered granite, dismounted at my front porch. A shout carried over the storm's roar. "Finn O'Malley, we need words with you." I looked back at Lyra. She had pressed herself against the far wall, a fragile shadow in the gloom. Her terror was an honest, unvarnished thing, and in that moment, the questions about her disguise and her secrets fell away. She was a woman in mortal danger, and that was all I needed to know. "Stay quiet," I told her, my voice low and steady. I stepped out into the rain, the cold air a sharp shock against my skin. The three men stood on my porch, their long coats dripping. "Evening, gentlemen," I called out, staying in the yard, my stance casual but my muscles coiled for a fight. Hell of a night for a ride. The tall man's smile was thin as a blade. "We're tracking someone," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Young woman, dark hair, probably in her early 20s. Goes by different names, but we have reason to believe she passed through this area." My expression remained neutral. "What she wanted for?" I asked. "Family business," the man replied, his tone as smooth and cold as a river stone. "Her people are concerned for her welfare. They just want her to come home." The way he said concerned made my blood run cold. These weren't her family. They were hunters, and welfare was a thin veil for something far more sinister. "Well, I haven't seen anyone like that," I replied, my voice calm. "You boys want to get out of this storm. The fire's warm inside, and there's coffee." The tall man studied me for a long, unsettling moment. His eyes were the color of steel, and they seemed to see straight through my lies. He glanced toward the stable, and my heart hammered against my ribs. "Much obliged for the offer, Morrison," he said finally. "But we'll be pushing on. The storm's got to break sometime." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder on his coat. "But if you do happen to see this girl, there's considerable money in sending word to us in town." He mounted up and the three of them rode off into the darkness, but I knew they weren't going far. They were watching. They were waiting. When I returned to the stable, Lyra was sitting exactly where I'd left her, her shoulders shaking, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice choked with emotion. "But now I've brought danger to your home, too." I sat back down on the hay bale, processing the adrenaline that still coursed through me. "So, you do speak English perfectly," I said. "A statement, not a question." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks in the dirt on her cheeks. "I speak many languages," she said, her voice now completely devoid of pretense. "English, French, Spanish, even some dialects of the indigenous people in the Southern Territories. It was part of my education. It was the first completely honest thing she'd said. The truth, finally, was out in the open. "What should I call you? I'm guessing it's not Lyra," I said gently. She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. "My name is Lyra," she said finally, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. "Just Lyra." The name felt more natural now, a small, beautiful island of truth in a sea of lies. Those men won't give up easy. And if they come back with more riders, hiding you won't be possible. She nodded and struggled to stand. I started to help, but she waved me off with a flash of fierce pride. "I need to keep moving," she said. "I've already brought you enough trouble." I stood and brushed the hay from my pants. "In your condition, you'd be dead before sunrise." "Besides," I said, a grim smile on my face, "I don't like the cut of those men. Anyone they're hunting probably doesn't deserve it." Lyra studied my face in the lantern light, her eyes searching for a motive, a catch. "You don't know me. You don't know what I might have done." "Maybe not," I admitted, "but I know what I saw tonight. A woman scared enough to risk bleeding to death rather than ask for help from anyone. And I know those three would put a bullet in my back if it served their purpose." She looked genuinely surprised. "Why would you help a stranger?" It was a fair question. I'd been asking myself the same thing. Let's just say I've never liked bullies, and leave it at that. Lyra nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. She smiled. It was tired and sad, but genuine. "Very well, Finn O'Malley," she said, "but I must warn you, the people hunting me won't stop until they find me. And when they do," she touched her wounded shoulder, "they'll kill anyone who helps me." That should have been my cue to saddle my horse and ride away from whatever trouble she represented. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Then we'd better make sure they don't find you." Lyra's smile faltered. "You don't understand what you're offering to risk." "Maybe not," I said, but I understand that sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks you can't calculate. What I didn't know was that her secrets ran deeper than I could ever imagine, and that by morning I'd be questioning everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that felt like a cruel joke against the grim reality of our situation. I hadn't slept a wink. Every creak and groan of the old house had me reaching for my rifle, expecting those 3 riders to return with reinforcements. When I brought coffee and a plate of biscuits to the stable, Lyra was already awake, examining her wound with a competence that surprised me. "How does it look?" I asked, setting the food on a wooden crate. "Clean," she said, her voice a little stronger. "No signs of infection. The bullet passed through cleanly." I handed her the coffee, watching her wrap her fingers around the warm cup like it was a precious jewel. "You seem to know something about gunshot wounds," I observed. "A woman traveling alone learns to tend her own injuries," she said, then took a careful sip. "Thank you for this kindness, Finn. And for last night." We sat in comfortable silence, sharing the simple breakfast. The morning light streaming through the stable boards revealed details I'd missed in the darkness. Her dress, though now torn and dirty, was made of expensive, finely woven fabric with embroidery that would have cost a month's wages. Her boots, beneath the thick layer of dust, were fine, soft leather, worked by a skilled craftsman, not the kind of rugged, functional boots a common traveler would wear. And the compass. The compass seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible energy, its brass casing polished and gleaming despite the mud and rain. "Lyra," I said carefully, "those clothes you're wearing, they're not a nomad's, and they're not cheap." She looked down at herself, as if seeing the dress for the first time. "I acquired them from someone who no longer needed them." That could mean anything from trade to theft to something darker. I decided not to push. "What I don't understand," I continued, "is why someone with your education, your obvious refinement, would be running alone through dangerous country, wearing a disguise." Lyra set down her coffee cup and stared at her hands, her delicate fingers tracing the faint lines of her calluses. "Sometimes circumstances force us to become people we never thought we could be." "What kind of circumstances?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, the kind that leave you with no choice but to disappear completely. Before I could press her for more, we heard the sound of a single horse approaching. Lyra's entire body went rigid. "Just one rider," I said, moving to the window. "It might be a neighbor." But when I looked out, my blood ran cold. It was the tall man from last night, the one with eyes like steel. He was alone this time, sitting on his horse just outside comfortable shooting range, watching my house like a hawk. "He's back," I told Lyra. "Just him." But Lyra had gone completely white. "He's testing you," she said, her voice an unnatural calm. "Seeing if you'll reveal anything in daylight that you didn't reveal last night." The way she said it, with such chilling certainty, made me realize she understood these men's tactics far better than she should have. "Lyra," I said slowly, "how do you know how hunters like that operate?" She looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her years. "Because, Finn O'Malley, I've been running from them for longer than you can imagine." The lone rider stayed put for nearly an hour, just sitting his horse and watching. Lyra remained hidden in the stable while I went about my normal morning chores, feeding the horses and checking the water troughs, trying to act like a man with nothing to hide. Finally, the rider turned and headed back toward town, but his message was clear. "We're watching you." "He's gone," I told Lyra when I returned to the stable, but not far. She was pacing like a caged animal, and I noticed she moved with an unusual grace for someone who'd been wounded less than 12 hours ago. "They'll be back tonight," she said with certainty. "Probably more of them. They know I'm here, Finn. They can sense it." "How can you be so sure?" Lyra stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "Because I know how they think, how they hunt." Something about the way she said hunt made me pause. "Lyra, Who are these people? What do they want with you? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking vulnerable again. They want to take me back to a life I would rather die than return to. What kind of life? The kind where women are property and choices are made for them by men who see them as investments rather than human beings. That explained the fear, but not the expensive clothes, the education, or her apparent familiarity with these hunters' methods. You're not just running from an arranged marriage, are you? I asked gently. Lyra's laugh was bitter, a harsh sound in the quiet stable. If only it were that simple. She moved to the stable door and peered out through the crack, scanning the horizon like someone accustomed to being watched. Finn, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you have family? People who depend on you? Anyone who would be hurt if something happened to you? The question sent a chill down my spine. My parents were gone. My sister lived in a town far away, and I hadn't seen her in years. My sister lives in the city. Parents are both gone. Why? Lyra turned back to me, and there was something almost calculating in her expression, like she was weighing variables in an equation I couldn't see. Because the people hunting me don't just kill their targets. They kill anyone who helps their targets, anyone who gets in their way, anyone who might know too much. How do you know that? Because, she said quietly, I've seen them work before. The way she said it made me realize Lyra wasn't just running from these people. She knew them, personally. Hey there. Friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you. Lyra, who are you really? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her making some kind of internal decision. Someone who made a terrible mistake, she said finally. Someone who trusted the wrong people and learned too late what they were capable of. Before I could ask what she meant, she was moving toward the stable door with sudden urgency. They're coming back, she whispered. More of them this time. We need to go now. I looked out and saw she was right. 5 riders this time, approaching at a steady trot with the confidence of men who'd run out of patience. Lyra, there's something you're not telling me. Something important. She looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. Yes, she said simply. There, Island. But if we survive the next hour, I promise I'll tell you everything. That should have been reassuring. But something about the way she said everything made me think the truth might be more dangerous than the lies. We slipped out the back of the stable just as the 5 riders reached my front yard, their boots heavy on the packed earth. Lyra moved through the brush behind my property with a silent grace that seemed impossible for someone in a torn dress and dusty boots, while I, a man who had lived in these hills for years, struggled not to snap every branch in my path. This way, she whispered, leading me toward a rocky outcropping about a quarter-mile from the house, a place I'd never noticed before. We'd barely reached cover when we heard the sound of my front door being kicked in. These men had given up any pretense of civility. They're searching the house, I whispered. Lyra nodded, peering around the rocks. When they don't find me there, they'll check the stable. Then they'll start tracking. How long do we have? I asked, my heart thumping against my ribs. Not long, she replied, her voice filled with a chilling certainty. These men are experienced. I studied her profile as she watched the house, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Lyra, I said, you know these people personally, don't you? She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. They worked for my family. Something like that. Before I could press further, we heard shouting from the direction of my house. One of the men had found our trail. Time to move, Lyra said, and suddenly she was leading me through terrain I'd lived near for years, but had never truly explored. For the next 2 hours, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the hills. Lyra seemed to know instinctively which paths would hide our tracks and which way the wind was blowing to confuse any dogs they might bring. She moved like someone who'd done this before, many times over. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, we found temporary shelter in a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. We're safe for a while, Lyra said, settling against the cave wall with obvious exhaustion. Lyra, I said, sitting across from her, it's time for some truth. Those men know exactly how to track people. You know exactly how to evade them. This isn't some random group of bounty hunters chasing a runaway bride. She stared at the water cascading past the cave entrance. No, she said finally, it isn't. Then what is it? Lyra took a deep breath, and when she looked at me, I saw a resignation in her eyes, like someone who'd finally decided to stop running from the truth. Finn, she began, what would you say if I told you that everything you think you know about me is a lie? I'd say I've already figured that out. She smiled sadly. What if I told you that my real name isn't Lyra, that I'm not a nomad, not any of the things I've claimed to be? My heart was hammering, but I kept my voice steady. I'd say I've been waiting for you to trust me with the truth. Lyra nodded slowly. The truth is, Finn O'Malley, that I'm not the victim in this story. I'm not some innocent woman running from an arranged marriage or family persecution. She paused, and the silence stretched between us like a held breath. The truth is, I'm the daughter of one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the Southwest. His name is Corvus Thorne. He owns half the freight lines and controls every weapons shipment in the territory. And a few months ago, I stole something from him that could destroy his entire empire. The waterfall roared outside our cave, but inside, the silence was deafening. What did you steal? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lyra's smile was sharp as broken glass. I stole the secrets of his power, the evidence that could hang him and every man who works for him, including, she said, meeting my eyes, the men who are hunting us right now. Lyra reached into the small leather pouch hanging from her belt and pulled out something I hadn't expected, the brass compass. From it, she withdrew what looked like a series of strange, interlocking metal pieces and a small folded map. My father is Corvus Thorne, she said, her voice matter-of-fact. He is also responsible for the deaths of at least 30 people, including 3 territorial judges, a federal marshal, and 2 entire families who refused to sell their land. I stared at the strange metal pieces. They were intricate and alien, unlike anything I'd ever seen. This, she said, holding up a small, pointed shard, is the key to his empire. It's a piece of a larger puzzle, a map to a hidden cache of legendary weapons, the ultimate power in this territory. And why are you showing me this? I asked, my mind reeling. Why not take it to the authorities? Her laugh was bitter. Which authorities, Finn? The sheriffs he's paid off? The territorial governor who owes his position to my father's political contributions? The federal marshals who've been taking his money for years? He controls them all. She had a point, one that made my stomach churn. So you stole this to stop him? I asked. I stole it, yes, she said, carefully refolding the pieces and tucking them back into the pouch. But not for the reasons you think. I stole it because a few months ago, I discovered that my father's next target was a small ranch owned by a family named O'Malley, a family with one son who'd been asking too many questions about missing shipments and mysterious deaths in the territory. The blood drained from my face. My family. Lyra nodded. Your parents didn't die in that wagon accident, Finn. My father had them killed because they discovered one of his secret weapons routes and were planning to report it to the authorities. They were close, but not close enough. He was planning to take you out next. The cave seemed to spin around me. My parents had died 2 years ago when their wagon went off a cliff during a storm. At least, that's what everyone had assumed. You're lying, I whispered, the words a desperate plea. I wish I were. Lyra's voice was gentle now, almost compassionate. That's why I came here, Finn. That's why I let myself get shot trying to reach you. I came to warn you that you were next on his list. The compass. It's a guide to the last known location of the weapons. It's the only thing that can stop him. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just told me. You've been protecting me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Trying to. But now, she gestured toward the cave entrance beyond which 5 killers were hunting us. Now we're both targets, and I'm not sure either of us will live long enough for justice to matter. The silence stretched between us while I absorbed the magnitude of what she'd revealed. Finally, I found my voice. Lyra, if everything you've told me is true, then those men outside aren't just hunting you. They're hunting both of us, and they won't stop until we're dead. She nodded. That's exactly right. Then we have two choices. We can keep running until they eventually catch us. Or, I looked at the compass she'd risked her life to steal, then at the woman who'd sacrificed everything to warn a stranger about danger. Or we stop running and start fighting back. Lyra stared at me as if I'd suggested we fight the wind itself. Finn, you don't understand what you're proposing. My father has resources, connections, armies of men who kill for money. We're just two people with some pieces of a compass and nowhere to run. Maybe, I said, a grim determination setting in. But we have something he doesn't expect us to have. What's that? Each other. And the truth. For the first time since I'd known her, Lyra looked genuinely hopeful. You would do that? Risk everything to help me bring down my own father? I thought about my parents, about the lie I'd been living for 2 years, about the woman sitting across from me who'd given up her entire life to warn me about danger. Lyra, I said, your father killed my family and planned to kill me. You saved my life by coming here. The way I see it, we're already in this together. What I didn't know was that her father's men had found our trail, and by nightfall, we'd discovered just how far Corvus Thorn would go to protect his secrets. If you're watching on television, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. We waited until darkness enveloped the hills before leaving the cave. The moon was a sliver of silver in the star-dusted sky, offering just enough light to navigate the treacherous terrain toward the abandoned silver mines of Serenity Creek, about 10 miles east. Lyra had suggested it, saying it was a place only her father knew about, a place where she had spent part of her lonely childhood, exploring the subterranean labyrinths, while her father conducted his dark business. The mines are our only hope, Finn, she explained as we picked our way carefully down a rocky slope. They connect to a vast network of abandoned shafts. If we can get inside, we can use the tunnels to reach the other side of the mountain. The night was clear and cold, with enough moonlight to see our path, but not so much that we'd be easily spotted by our pursuers. Lyra moved beside me with the quiet confidence of someone who had traveled this dangerous country in darkness many times. Finn, she said after we had been walking for about an hour, her voice a low murmur, I need you to know something about what we're attempting. What's that? I asked, my senses on high alert for any sound of pursuit. Even if we succeed in exposing my father, even if the compass reveals the location of his hidden weapons, he won't just surrender. He'll fight back with everything he has. He won't stop at us. You mean he'll try to kill us before we can reveal the truth? I asked, checking our back trail, seeing nothing but empty moonlit hills. I mean, he'll try to kill us, anyone who has seen the compass, and probably burn down half the territory to cover his tracks. The weight of her words was a sobering thought. Lyra, are you having second thoughts about this? She stopped walking and turned to face me. In the moonlight, her face was serious, but her determination was a tangible thing. No, she said. I'm having first thoughts about whether you understand what you've agreed to help me do. Stopping him might cost us both our lives. I looked at this woman who had risked everything to warn a stranger, who had been carrying the key to her father's doom for months while living like a fugitive. She could have disappeared into Mexico or California, but instead, she had come to save someone she'd never met. Lyra, 3 days ago I was a simple rancher with a quiet life. Now I'm on the run with the daughter of the most dangerous man in the Southwest, carrying the key to his destruction. And you know what? I smiled. A weary, bitter thing. It's the most right I've felt about anything in years. She studied my face in the moonlight, then smiled back. You're either very brave or very foolish, Finn O'Malley. Probably both, I said. Just as we were about to continue, Lyra suddenly grabbed my arm. Wait, she whispered. Do you hear that? I strained my ears and caught the distinct sound of multiple horses moving at a steady pace, maybe a mile behind us. They found our trail, Lyra said. How many? At least 8, maybe more. My heart sank. We couldn't outrun that many on foot. Lyra was quiet for a moment, thinking, her eyes fixed on the compass in her pouch. "Finn," she said, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper, "there's something else I haven't told you, something that might change how you feel about helping me." "What now?" I asked, my patience worn thin by the relentless pursuit. "I'm not just Corvus Thorne's daughter, I'm his only heir. When he dies, I inherit everything, the freight lines, the silver mines, the entire network, all of it." I stared at her, the revelation a shock to my system. "Are you saying you're rich?" "I'm saying I'm potentially one of the wealthiest people in North America." She paused, the moon catching a single tear that escaped her eye. "And my father knows that if I live long enough to inherit, I'll use that wealth and power to destroy everything he's built." The sound of horses was getting closer, a relentless, terrifying march. "Lyra, why are you telling me this now?" "Because what I'm about to suggest requires you to trust me completely. I want you to understand exactly what's at stake." "What are you suggesting?" Lyra smiled, and for the first time, it was the smile of someone who had just figured out how to win an impossible game. "I'm suggesting we stop running away from my father's men and start running toward them." Lyra's plan was either brilliant or completely insane, and I wasn't sure which. We reached the entrance to the abandoned mines just as the sound of pursuit grew loud enough to suggest our hunters were less than half a mile behind us. The opening was a dark, yawning mouth in the hillside, partially concealed by scrub brush and fallen rocks. Lyra turned to face me, her eyes filled with a fierce resolve. "Finn, once we go in there, we're committed. If my memory of these tunnels is wrong, then we die underground instead of out here. But at least we'll have a fighting chance," I finished. I looked at the compass pouch. Was it worth it? Risking our lives for some pieces of metal and a map? Lyra saw the doubt in my eyes. "Finn," she said, "those pieces represent years of murder, corruption, and terror. They're the only way to stop my father from killing more innocent people like your parents." She paused. "Yes, it's worth it." The sound of horses was very close now. We could hear men's voices calling to each other as they tracked us. "All right," I said. "Let's do this." We slipped into the mine entrance just as the first riders appeared on the ridge above us. The tunnel was pitch black and smelled of stale air and old timber, but Lyra seemed to know where she was going. "This way," she whispered, leading me deeper into the mountain. Behind us, we heard shouts as the men discovered the mine entrance. Then came the sound I'd been dreading, boots on stone as they followed us into the darkness. "Lyra," I whispered, "please tell me you remember how to get out of here." "I remember," she replied, but something in her voice made me think she was less certain than she sounded. We moved deeper into the maze of tunnels, guided only by Lyra's memory and the distant echo of our pursuers. Then, just when I was beginning to think we were hopelessly lost, I saw something that made my heart leap, a faint glimmer of light ahead. "The other entrance." "We made it," Lyra breathed. But as we approached the light, I realized our troubles were far from over. Silhouetted against the mine opening were two more figures, men who had been positioned to cut off our escape. "Lyra," I whispered. They knew about the tunnels, too. She looked ahead at the waiting men, then back toward the sounds of pursuit behind us, her shoulders slumped. "Finn, I'm sorry. I've led us into a trap." For the first time since I'd known her, Lyra sounded truly defeated. That's when I realized we had only one chance left, and it would require us to trust each other completely. "Lyra, give me the compass," I said, my voice urgent, "and take my 6-shooter. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't hesitate. She unclasped the pouch and handed me the small, intricate compass, and I gave her my Colt. "I'll create a diversion. You find a way out of here. Find that safe place. You are the key to this whole thing. You're the one who can find the truth, the one who can bring justice." "Finn, that's suicide. We were supposed to do this together." Lyra's voice was filled with a desperate, heartbroken plea. "Maybe," I said, a faint smile on my lips, "but it's a chance. Now go." Before she could argue, I moved forward, a living shield between her and the approaching danger. She hesitated for a split second. Then I saw her turn and disappear into the darkness, a ghost fading into the shadows of the mine. I didn't know if I would ever see her again, if she would survive this, if I would survive this. But I knew that for the first time in a long, long time, I was fighting for something more than just myself. I was fighting for justice, for a future, and for a woman who had given up everything to save a stranger. A cowboy love story in its rawest, most desperate form. The sound of boots grew louder, the men closing in.